Welcome to the Saynetwork podcast. I'm Jim, and I'm here with Megan Villalpando.
Hey, guys.
And Lisa Garcia, our guest on
Hi,
the
guys.
couch. On today's episode, we are talking about drugs, not how to do drugs or where to find drugs, but mostly the prevention of drugs. More specifically, how to get young people to say no to drugs. We will also explore a model Iceland used to steer young people away from drug use. And finally, talk through signs the teen in your life is engaging in drugs and what to do about it. Thankful to have our good friend Lisa Garcia on the guest couch. Lisa is not just a great colleague, she is a great human. She works with us here at THQ in risk management. And the good news is I don't believe that Megan or I have had to work directly with Lisa since she's been in risk management.
That's good news.
Yes.
Isn't that good news?
That's great news.
Yes.
I've done a lot of work in risk management over my years, and I've had a pretty good run lately, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I don't know if I should be bragging about that.
Maybe
but
because we haven't had events.
possibly.
Much happening.
Possibly.
We've been in quarantine.
Most of the work I did early on with risk management was with child safety and working through all that stuff, but luckily we haven't had major incidents lately. But anyway, Lisa, tell us a little bit about you, how you came to working here at the Salvation Army.
Well, I started actually in 2005. I found myself in the Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Program in Pasadena. And I was checked in there to get a handle on my drug and alcohol addiction. And I completed the 6-month program. And then I stayed on as the assistant resident manager, started working in the thrift store, started working in the office, and just kind of worked my way up. In 2008, I applied for a job at THQ in the property department. And I've been at THQ ever since. I've been in risk management now for almost 2 years.
Nice. And you got your master's degree in that time frame too.
I did.
Right?
I actually got my bachelor's and my master's during the time I was in property. And I graduated from USC with the Master's of Public Administration, the nonprofit focus. And so I'm able to use a lot of that in my new position in risk management.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, what a journey.
What a journey.
Yep. And family, kids?
Family. I have 3 kids, and my youngest is just graduating from college next semester. My oldest is, she works in logistics.
Okay.
And she is doing very, very well. And my son is a security guard, and he is doing awesome also.
Awesome.
Nice.
That's good news all around. I came across an article that I found very interesting. And it will be linked in the show notes as always. But it talked about a model that the country of Iceland is using to get kids off of drugs. Now, there's been many drug prevention programs. I was a DARE kid growing up.
Yep.
And I misunderstood what DARE meant because my friends always said drugs are really excellent because that's what kids do. We find different ways of saying things. And there was a lot of drug prevention, and I grew up in a time where the White House, there was a war on drugs and that kind of stuff. And there's different documentaries you could watch on that to understand that era. Very fascinating. But Iceland, too, had drug prevention education programs, and they just weren't working. And largely, they don't work, those education programs. So they started a program where it took a village to do it, but it's getting kids more active and then passing some laws. And they've combined a kind of a cocktail of things, no pun intended.
What's this episode about again? No, just kidding.
They combined a bunch of things, and they have now risen to the top in the European Union area of kids with their drug use being so far down. And it's almost as simple as keeping them active, finding them extracurricular activities, and again, passing some laws. And as one guy says, and we'll talk about it, is enforcing common sense, which I love that part.
Me too.
Enforcing the common sense. So drugs are a constant issue in our world. We have programs come and go. Like I said, I was a DARE kid. And so the curfews, sports, and understanding brain chemistry have all helped dramatically curb substance abuse in the country of Iceland. could it be that simple? And I mean, let's start there. Could it be that simple? It seems that simple, and it seems plausible. Does that, when you read that story, did it resonate with you? You're like, yeah, that can do that.
I think part of the problem with the United States is that we have short-term funding, and we don't say we're going to dedicate a certain amount of money for 5 years and see where it goes. We do kind of year to year, but I think that the model could be used here if we applied it. I think even on a small scale, we could use, certain communities but I think that we have to include everybody. We have to be inclusive of the lower economic people who are in the lower economic that can't join sports or can't pay the entrance fee or pay for the uniforms or don't have parents to drive them to and from competitions. And I think that we need to level the playing field for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of, as I was reading this, I was thinking, I almost feel like kids are over-programmed. So the results of that survey were really interesting to me because I feel like here kids are kind of over-programmed. I see kids being really stressed and dealing with stress and anxiety at a really young age. Like kids are being programmed from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed a lot of times.
That's a good point.
That's true.
So like I forget what it was called, but I did watch one documentary.
Narcos?
No. But it was about, this was like college students and sort of like how they will take like performance enhancement, drugs, prescription drugs to help them focus and stuff like that. So I don't know. I was really surprised by the results because I do feel like a lot of kids are really over-programmed. Now, some are not, but I feel like a lot are. There's a lot of pressure on kids at a younger age now.
Yeah, I think Lisa brings up a point of the different socioeconomic levels that probably ranges more than others. So some socioeconomic levels, maybe mid to high upper class, are heavily programmed, where lower, maybe not as much. I know that my wife teaches in a school that is a lower socioeconomic level, and getting kids to participate in programs and having parental support can be a struggle at times.
Right.
And so, but that's not dismissing the other socioeconomic levels. Drug use is rampant in all.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter where they come from. That is an issue altogether. What leads people to drugs? A host of things. What led to some of your past?
I think that alcohol use was rampant in high school. Everybody drank. I used it to fit in. I used it to be funnier. Even as an adult, I used to always say, it makes me, I was wittier. I was prettier. Those are the things that you feel emboldened to say things that you may not say. And I think that's addictive. I think not being quiet, being outspoken and being able to, and then I almost think that it puts a component that you could do whatever you want to do and really not have any kind of accountability.
Yeah.
You say, I was drunk.
Yeah.
And,
that's interesting.
And I think that, what I've learned in recovery is that drinking and using drugs is a symptom. It's a symptom of other things. I didn't realize it back then, but, I had a lot of familial trauma with my mom and dad were both addicts and alcoholics. And Megan and I spoke a little before. And one of the things, I swore I would never be like my parents. And honestly, I turned out just like them. And I'm happy to say that my mom is sober now too.
Wow, great.
And when I got sober, she wasn't having any part of it. And now her and I, and we had a tough relationship growing up. I lived with my grandparents, and her and I had a tough time at it. And we are so close now, and it's only because we're sober.
Wow,
it's
great.
only because we're sober. We just spent the weekend at Great Wolf Lodge, and yeah.
Did you go on the water slides?
I did. I actually did for
Good
2
for
days.
you.
So I did the surfing thing.
Nice.
And but I know that stuff would never happen if I was still drinking and using.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be employed. I wouldn't have my kids in my life.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Addiction takes you down a path that it's very, very dark. And there's days where you just do not think that there's a way out.
Mm.
And, I think the Salvation Army's ARC programs for people who want to put in the work and want beneficial results, they can have that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, I was very upset to hear, I want to say it's like, I know that we're higher than the national average, but our relapse rates, I want to say, I don't know the numbers, but we have a pretty high relapse rate, but we're better than other programs.
Yeah.
And that to me is still so scary because, nobody listens to the DARE programs.
Mhm.
Nobody listens to don't do this, do as I say, not as I do. And if we find a way to start engaging with kids, I think there's some kids that don't have anybody to go talk to, that don't have an adult they can trust, that do not have the guidance that they're looking for. And I think a lot of this is generational. I think this is, maybe their parents didn't know how to parent and maybe their parents didn't know how to parent. But at some point we have to start breaking this generational curse that is just taking our kids down. Our kids, I feel like they're hurting inside. I feel like social media has made it a lot harder because people see what's on social media and think that that's reality. And maybe they do want to drink to escape, or maybe they do want to take drugs because everybody else is doing it. But I think we need to start concentrating on what they need and what will help them.
Yeah. I shared with them before that I read this morning that overdoses are up 28% this year. And I mean, you could look and see a pandemic's weighed heavily mentally on everybody and dealing with that. But combine that with the things that you're talking about as well. It's a scary place to be. And Lisa and I talked yesterday about, like, you don't know if you're the one that is going to be the addict when you start with drugs or alcohol or anything like that. You don't know that you could just take one and then leave, or drink one beer and then leave. You don't know if that's it. That's what's scary too. And I think that for me was always kind of a fear for me. And I actually have not had any drugs or alcohol in my life. And but I was afraid because I do have a bit of an addictive personality to different things. So it wouldn't be far-fetched for me to run into something like that and then be addicted quickly. And so it's really scary. It's interesting that, going back to the common sense, while their approach is evidence-based and their studies, they had a lot of studies that they did for many years. They say that enforcing common sense is the ticket. Why is it so hard to do where we live? Like, if common sense is just the ticket, why is that so hard where we live?
Because common sense is not a flower that grows in everybody's garden.
That's perfect.
I mean, I think that we have to get back to basics.
Okay.
We have to get back to what is common sense.
Mhm.
We have to get back into, talking to our kids. And, I shared with Jim, one of the things with my kids is that we had kind of a deal with my younger one mainly. We had kind of a deal, like, if you tell me what's going on, if you find yourself in trouble and you tell me what's going on, we can work it out. Maybe you won't be punished. Maybe, if you find yourself in a situation, I mean, I still tell my kids, if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have a DD or something goes on, please call me 24 hours a day, anytime. Now we can send an Uber for you. But before it was, we will pick you up.
Yeah.
And even that didn't work all the time. Even that was, maybe the next day after we've already been in trouble, we're like, yeah, I really wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So I think even being willing to have that conversation, look, if a kid tries alcohol and then comes to you and says to you, I did this and I'm sorry I did it, but I need help, we should be able to open it up, and our kids shouldn't be scared that that's going to be it. They're going to be on lockdown for the rest of their lives because they made a mistake.
Yeah.
We have to get to where I'm not encouraging youth drinking, but things happen.
Mhm.
Kids push boundaries. And so I think we need to open up that dialogue and say, what's making you do this? What can I do? Is it that I need to enroll? Is it that you are bored and you want things to do? I think it's our responsibility. And like I mentioned before, some kids don't have a person to be able to talk to. And I think that that's what we need. I think we need more mentors. I think we need more people to stand in the gap.
Yeah.
Where, that we have parents that are working 2 and 3 jobs also.
Right.
So it's not always just a parental being absent for any other reason other than they're trying to pay the rent and buy groceries.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important. Megan?
Yeah, I think Lisa just hit the nail on the head. Like, we have to figure out what are the reasons why they're, doing these, like, drinking or doing drugs or whatever. Like, why are you doing that? And I agree with you. I think for parents, it is hard to I think many try to have those conversations, and maybe they're just kind of hitting a wall and they don't know where to turn and they get really frustrated. So, yeah, I completely agree. Like, we have to find ways to address those issues.
Yeah, and I think in the Salvation Army, it's hard because I grew up thinking that drinking was a sin altogether. Like, and it's something that Salvation Army does not do, participates in, and so like it was such a hot topic, and it was like one of the biggest forms of rebellion in the Salvation Army was just to have a beer and stuff, and I think. I don't have anything wrong with that necessarily, but I think one of the hard parts is it doesn't get talked about because they're so afraid that they may lose their standing in whatever part of the Salvation Army they're in. And that's I think that's a problem. And I think we have to be able to have communication. There are like in our troops programs and different things, they have like drug awareness and stuff, but it's not something in youth work that is commonly talked about is drug use. In a constructive manner, it's more of in a reactive manner of like, okay, Megan was drunk over the weekend and we have to deal with that. Not you.
Why me?
I just said a name. I wasn't pointing any names
because
out.
I'm in recovery, so you got to be the one.
Yeah, exactly. But it seems more reactive, at least in my circles, than it's been before. And there's an element of shame that is involved in that too, that can be difficult for them to be willing, if they do have an issue, to come forward. We had an incident at one of our camps, and this was on a more positive side. It was heavy though. It was a WYI. This was a long time ago. And honestly, I don't remember what the sermon was about. I don't remember at all. And one of the counselors came up afterwards and said, and we have a pretty big issue. And we generally don't have a lot of issues at YI. So I was like, oh, okay. And a girl was convicted by the morning message. It spoke to her. And so she went into her bag and got out crystal meth that was in her bag and gave it to her counselor and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was like,
wow,
that was heavy. And I'm sitting there looking at like crystal meth, just sitting right there. It was a surreal experience. But I always look back to like, there was something obviously must have been said about that type of lifestyle that convicted that person so much that they were willing to put themselves on the line to say, I have this. And that safety is really what we should be striving for, of being able to have kids to come and say, hey, I've got this problem, or you having the credibility in your relationship to see a kid that is going down a path that is not well for them, to be able to call them out and say, hey, I see what's going on.
Right.
We have to do that. And it's tough with like addiction. It's tough. Like, I've worked with kids that have struggled with this, and you have your high moments, dang it, no pun intended.
On a roll today.
I know. You have your moments of like victory, and then your heavy, heavy moments of defeat, and it's exhausting because of relapses and stuff. And you think, like, for me, I'm a person that has never done drugs. So to me, it's almost, I have to catch myself being like, just stop doing it.
Right.
Like, what's wrong with you? Just stop doing it. it's not that simple.
No, I mean, I had lost everything when I got to the ARC. It wasn't everything was going great for me and I decided, let me go check in for 6 months
Right.
at the ARC, because that's not what had happened. I was homeless. I had lost custody of my kids. I was, I had really hit rock bottom. And, that term is used a lot. And it's like, well, when you hit rock bottom, you start to go up. No, there's people, we hit rock bottom and then we bounce up and then we hit a little lower and we hit a little lower. And so I was lucky that when I got to the ARC, I was ready to do whatever it took. And even, when I got to the ARC, I couldn't even stay sober the 48 hours it took to get into the program.
Wow.
And I drank on the way to the ARC. And I know it was God, though, because when I got there, they asked me, has it been 48 hours? And for the first time in a lot of years, I was honest. And I said, no, it hasn't. And, they don't hold beds there. And they held my bed for 48 hours. And they said, we will hold your bed. And I had nowhere to go. They gave me a referral to the shelter down the street. And my friend who took me actually made arrangements with her family, and I stayed with them for the 2 days. But as soon as I got in, first time I went to church, I came in on a Thursday and I went to, it was called Impact back then.
Yeah.
It was Friday nights, and I was crying the entire service, and I knew I was in the right place, and I knew that whatever was going to come at me, God was with me. And I'd never had that kind of relationship with God. And so I knew that I was in the right place. And so I had never attempted recovery before. And I just stayed the course. I had disappointments when I was in recovery. I was supposed to be able to see my kids when I was 4 months sober. And when I was 4 months, I called and they said, well, we're going to wait and see if you complete the program. And normally I would have walked out, been like, I'll show them. And I know it was God saying, no, you're going to show them a different way and you're going to finish the program. And, my relationship with God has just gotten stronger, has just gotten solidified more and more. And I am so grateful. Like my kids are grateful. My family wasn't even speaking to me. They were like, we do not want her around. And it took me not just staying sober for a few weeks, but I had to put the work in and I had to show them that I was not going back. And for me, that's been the greatest gift of that. But it would have been much better to not have to get into that position, to have to get out of. And I have to work at it. I still have to work at it, because the easy way out would be just to not do the work. But that isn't going to make my life any better. Yeah. There's nothing in my life right now that having a drink or using some meth is going to make better.
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. One of my favorite parts of the study was the encouraging of parents to spend more time with their kids and encouraging them just to be active. So what are barriers that we have here in the United States that stand in the way for that? I mean, you talked about work. You have people that were working multiple jobs and stuff, and maybe they are with a relative watching them. Maybe they're not.
Maybe they're latchkey kids.
Exactly. And so those are some barriers. But what are some other barriers that prevent this as parents? And you as a new parent, are you paying attention to your child?
Yeah. Honestly, I will say
some days.
Yeah. It's tough. I have a long commute. My husband's commute is shorter, but it's still a little bit long. And so we find ourselves, not able to spend a whole lot of time with our son, during the day and stuff, which is difficult and has me just conversations like this definitely have me like thinking about a lot of that kind of thing. But growing up, my mom was a single mom. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so when I think about how sometimes like my husband and I feel stretched a little thin, I can't even imagine like single parents as well, like my mom and stuff, how to get that quality time in and stuff. It's very difficult. And that's not just like a problem in America or a barrier in America. I think that's, any country has those challenges, but I think that that's a major one for sure.
And just, I just want to say, it's not just absent parents, the kids who have absent parents who get into addiction.
Yeah.
It's also the other way too.
Yeah,
it's also
sure.
Parents who are very, two parent families who are very present, who are very involved. Their kids still end up in addiction. Yeah. And so it's almost like a fine balancing act. It's almost like parenting, being present, not overbearing, because I've heard from people that that's one of the reasons they've turned to, their parents were demanding perfection, standing over them all the time. So it's almost like we can't win for losing. We're like, if you're a present parent, then there's rebellion. And if you're an absentee parent, there's rebellion. So it's almost like you have to get on a one-on-one with each, and each kid's different. So you have to get on a one-on-one with that kid and find out what makes them tick, what they're anxious about. I don't remember being anxious in elementary school. A little when I moved schools, but I don't remember being, and now it seems like kids are anxious.
Yeah.
Kids are very anxious, very worried about what's going on and very worried about, even in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Very, my great niece and nephew were taught school by my mom. So their great grandma was home. And her and I just talked about it this weekend. She said she did a pretty darn good job.
Good for her.
That's awesome.
So we said, she did. But what about the kids who had nobody there?
Yeah.
Now they've lost a year and a half of schooling.
Yeah.
And social constructs that, maybe would give them some ally in the day. Maybe it's a kid at school. Maybe it's a teacher at school. I think that we've just really got to get a one-on-one with these kids.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think you bring up multiple good points. The one I wanted to touch on was you could be present but absent at the same time. And,
absolutely.
And that's a real big issue, and something I've always tried to be aware of like we're present in my kids' lives, but you could easily go absent while you're there. Let them go into the room, do whatever they want. We'll see you later after dinner maybe, and not do stuff. And it's easy. It's easy to do that.
Right.
And in many ways gives you relief, sometimes because you're like, you don't have to deal with anything and stuff. And, but I'm also realizing as my kids are older, it's moving very quickly, and you only have one shot at it.
Yep.
And so it's like, you have to be present and go through those experiences and give them different things, but also allow for the freedoms for them as well. Allow them to explore their own stuff and not micromanage their lives as well. Try to treat them like humans,
right?
And be honest with them. I like, now that I have a teenager and a tween, of trying to,
bless you.
Yeah, it's weird you're trying to go through, and I want them to have their own views on things, not just my views, because this world probably wouldn't be great if it was just my views. So, but telling them what's right and what's wrong, but knowing that they're going to have to learn themselves as well. It's quite a balancing act, and it's exhausting at times, but I only have one shot at it. You only have one shot at it. And I think of that not just in a parent sense, but in a youth worker sense. It's the same thing. The kids are coming through and they're part of your group, and you have one shot. And so your words matter, and the things that you do matter, the attending of their games, encouraging them, getting involved in the different things, that all matters. And so that's part of our role as youth leaders as well. And the church, because we talked about this village mentality of getting them involved and finding something. And you might have a kid that doesn't want to get involved in anything.
Right.
You have those kids.
Right.
Those are the most difficult at times. But in the world of developmental assets, they have a thing called finding the spark, and which I'm partial to.
Yeah.
As you can imagine. But as communicating with kids and understanding what drives them, what gets them excited, like what is an occupation that they want to do, and then drive them in those channels. And I think that all those type of things are very practical, and stuff that we need to be aware of as youth leaders, to get them involved, because it does feel like, and I don't know if this is true, but it does feel like, uh, relaxing and backing off the gas pedal on a lot of stuff could quickly lose them,
Mm-hmm.
and quickly things could go awry, because it happens quickly,
Right.
and it's hard to get back. And so there's just a sense of urgency that I've been feeling about this, and particularly with talking about drugs. The stats and the studies show that with some rules, activities, and community involvement, they can make a difference. And we talked about how that's possible here. I do think that the Salvation Army is uniquely situated for this
I think so too.
and stuff. And as I've been like kind of marinating in this topic, I feel like we maybe are not benefiting from that position as much as we could. We have an incredible rehab program that has produced saints over the years, and how can we use that strength of the ARC programs to help with drug awareness with kids? I mean, not only do we have to start talking about drugs again, because I remember like there was a youth council cycle that I went through where we were talking about drugs all the time, and then that's gone. Like,
Yeah,
we haven't really talked about that kind of
and
stuff
you lose
much.
them.
Yes.
You lose kids.
Right. So what are ways? I mean, and you've been through the program, and you've been through our core and stuff. What are ways that you think that we could use the Salvation Army's unique position to help bring awareness?
I mean, I think some of it is the appearance of the ARC
Mm-hmm.
participants. Look, they didn't start out like that. There's people that had very nice lives, and they weren't raised on the streets. Sure, we run the gamut
Sure.
of who's in the program. But I think that if we talked about how easy it happens, how easy the addiction actually happens, and it's not just others.
Yeah.
It can happen to you.
Yeah.
I think that I think that the ARC participants are very eager to feel normal. And I think when they're integrated in the core, it makes the biggest difference in the world.
Okay.
We spoke this morning briefly about the Hills.
Yeah.
They, the Yardleys were my administrators at the ARC, and the Hills were at Pasadena Tab. Those two sets of officers made a difference. They, to this day, I will say, I hope that I would have been able to do it with other officers in support, but they made it easy. We felt loved. We felt, and I think that can carry into the core programs.
Yeah.
When you have a core officer, or when you have somebody who's leading the programs, if the kids feel loved, it's big.
Yeah.
It's a lot bigger than when you're an adult and you get feel the love from them. But it wasn't, I think that we need to get focused back in on including people.
Yeah.
We don't just include these 3 kids because they act right, and disclude these 3 because they're a handful.
Yeah.
We need to love on those handful kids a little harder.
Yeah.
And let them feel included. I think part of addiction is feeling excluded. I think part of addiction is trying to fit in. And so if you're fitting in as a kid, you won't search for that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think also just, on a practical standpoint, maybe we can try to find ways to do more family-friendly things in the core activities. I think for the most part, our core do a really good job of that. But just looking for more opportunities even to be able to invite families from the ARC to our, troops Christmas party, or, just different things, find ways to get those connection points and just be as family-friendly as possible and reaching out to those ARC families.
Yeah, I agree.
Stories are important too. And hearing stories from people in the ARC on a Sunday morning through testimony, I think is important. I've had some great conversations with my own personal kids based off of testimonies that were shared at my core. I also think it's good to hear testimonies of things that are not sewn up either.
Yeah.
I always look back, and Megan, I think you were with us, where we had a kid who he was part of, like, they had to learn how to write their testimonies and they were going to share. And he's like, I don't know Jesus. Like, Jesus is
Mhm.
not my personal savior. So I don't really want to give a testimony. I was like, but that is your testimony.
Right.
Go ahead and share that if you want. And he's like, really? That seems counterintuitive to whatever you're doing. I said, but that's who you are. And that's what we want to hear. And we want to hear your story. And he did. And he shared his story. And he ended up becoming, getting saved about a month after that, because what happened there stirred inside him, which was great. But just hearing some of that of like, I was speaking at an ARC, and one of the guys, one of the guys who worked there, longtime worker, and the Hawaii ARC was saying it takes a lot of these guys 7 times
Mhm.
to come in.
Yeah,
and
that
out,
always sticks with me
out,
after you had said that.
out. And so needing to hear that too, and how difficult it is, and stuff. I think it's really important, and to be able to talk more about it. It kind of takes away some of the taboo stuff of that, and creates maybe a more safer place for kids that might be struggling.
Right. And that it's not, everything's not perfect.
Yeah.
Even if you're looking, I think sometimes too, for kids or adults that are in a core program, and maybe you're looking at a core officer and you think they have the perfect life with the perfect children.
Right.
And I think hearing that they're struggling, I
Yeah.
think hearing that there's, that they've had to have these discussions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that really makes it to where people, you don't want to be the odd person out.
Yeah.
So if you are in I think that's part of addiction too. Thinking that somebody else has it better than you, or that your life is so bad anyways. What's the difference?
Yeah.
What's the difference if I drink or use?
Right.
But I think that it's important to know that nobody's perfect. Nobody has, and the kid who didn't have a relationship with Jesus, that's real.
Mm.
And I think that we need to look at what's real and
Yeah.
not what just is appearances.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. I could keep going. I feel like we're just getting going. But thank you, Lisa, for joining us.
I had a great time.
And I really appreciate it. I want to share Salvation Army resource. We are plugging ourselves in this one. But our department put together a new youth worker onboarding kit. And so for new youth workers that show up to the core, they should have a pizza box. It's kind of a bait and switch, really. There's no pizza in the box,
Bummer.
but there's a t-shirt.
Unfortunately,
Oh.
yes.
So a t-shirt solves a lot of problems, but, and there's a wealth of information, a guidebook. You want to share a little bit about the guidebook? Just some highlights of what would be in the guidebook for the onboarding?
Yeah. So basically, it's really cool. We want to prepare and equip our youth leaders just for a successful youth ministry. So we've set up basically a 2-week onboarding experience. And so there's like activities to do each day. They don't take a very long time, but we cover everything from like Salvation Army history and mission to, sort of like an introspective look about why am I doing youth work? Why is this job different than other jobs that I've had before? There's opportunity for networking, getting, of course, training in Salvation Army youth programs, how to do those well. And it all goes through, basically, it's all in a guidebook. So it's really easy to use. You don't even have to have the physical book to do it. We also have everything online as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. It would be very helpful for people when they show up. If you don't know about it, check it out. We have information on our social media and with your DYS as well. That's good. A lot of information learned today. I think probably maybe the most important is that we need to continue to love each other, listen to each other, and be honest and raw, and kind of go through life together, and most certainly keep everybody included. Thanks for being here, Lisa, again. Anything we've talked about in this episode is linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe to Saynetwork podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or all three, so you don't miss out on the new content. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with a new episode.
See you
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.